Today, we're going to decode one of the most enduring myths in Western culture, the Golden Boy. And we're going to do it through the lens of a really insightful essay by author Owen Levy. He puts forward this chilling idea. What if one of our most celebrated ideals is actually a trap? Levy kicks off his critique with this really powerful line. Right from the get-go, he's telling us this isn't just about hair color or some beauty standard. Nope, he's arguing that the act of idealizing, of putting this image on a pedestal, is precisely what makes it so destructive. So that's the big question we're tackling. We're going to trace this whole archetype back to its ancient roots to really understand how a dream that's been passed down for thousands of years can actually turn into a modern-day nightmare. So where do we start? Well, we're going right to the source, Owen Levy's own writing. You see, in his fiction, he deliberately creates characters just to pull back the curtain on the dark side of this flawed ideal. Think of Levy's fiction as having two layers. On the surface, you've got characters like Earl who just perfectly fit that golden boy image. But what's really going on underneath is a sharp critique of how our society's obsession with this image ultimately traps and discards the very people who embody it. So you have to wonder, where did this powerful kind of two-faced ideal even come from? It's definitely not a modern invention. To really get its hold on us, we have to go way, way back. Thousands of years, to the classical world. You know, this archetype didn't just pop up overnight. It was built up, layer by layer, over centuries. It started as a sign of the gods in antiquity. Then it slowly morphed into a symbol of being a good person. And eventually, it was immortalized in Renaissance art as the absolute peak of perfection. Each era just added another powerful layer of meaning. Back in the ancient world, golden hair was, well, it was a really big deal. It wasn't just pretty. It was a mark of the divine, a trait you'd see on gods like Apollo and Aphrodite. Poets like Homer and Sappho wrote about it as a sign of greatness and beauty. For the Romans, it was so exotic that they would literally import wigs and dyes to get the look. And what's so fascinating is that even back then, they saw the danger. The Roman poet Ovid saw both sides of the coin, that seductive beauty, but also the potential for deception. So this idea that the beauty could be a mask, yeah, that's not new. It's woven right into the archetype's DNA. All right, let's fast forward a bit. As we move into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the archetype evolves. It's not just about a physical look anymore. It becomes something much, much deeper, a symbol of moral purity. And this is a really key moment. During this time, that external beauty, especially fair hair, started to be seen as an outward sign of inner virtue. It wasn't just about looking good anymore. It was about being good. The whole ideal became spiritual. And you see this idea getting cemented everywhere, in the big cultural touchstones of the time. In the legends of King Arthur, Guinevere's fairness was a symbol of her nobility. Petrarch's famous poems turned his beloved Laura into this angelic, golden-haired figure. And, who can forget Botticelli's Venus, rising from the sea with those flowing golden locks? That image has defined divine beauty for centuries. Okay, so we've traced the history. We've seen how this beautiful ideal was built, piece by piece. But now, this is where the story takes a dark turn. This is where we see how that ancient, beautiful dream becomes a lethal, modern trap. So, according to Levy's essay, it follows this really tragic path. It starts with idealization, which, paradoxically, actually attracts predators. That leads to exploitation, where the person is no longer a person, they're a commodity. To survive, they're forced into what Levy calls transactional survival, a desperate path that so often ends in despair and, tragically, an early death. And this whole tragic journey brings us right back to Levy's own fiction. He created the character of Earl to be the perfect embodiment of this ideal, and then he walks him right down this exact path. As Levy puts it, it's that very idealization that turns lethal. The beauty itself becomes the weapon. So you have to ask, what's it like for the person who has to live inside this archetype? Well, this myth isn't empowering. It doesn't offer freedom. Instead, it builds this gilded cage that, as Levy writes, ultimately traps and discards them. So after deconstructing this whole cultural phenomenon, what's the big takeaway? Well, the final part of Levy's essay is really a powerful call to action, to look beyond the myth and finally see the actual person. But here's the thing, the essay doesn't just leave us in this dark place. Levy actually ends with a plea for something really simple but also really profound. Just greater care. More protection for those who are targeted because they fit this ideal. And that's really the whole point, isn't it? This isn't just about tearing down an old idea. It's about building up our empathy so we can inspire real-world protection for the vulnerable people who find themselves living in the shadow of this archetype. Being aware of the problem is absolutely the first step, but that leaves us with one last big question. Now that we understand the danger, what comes next? How do we, as a culture, start to dismantle the trap and truly safeguard the real people behind the dream?